In his sleep, Robert Stevens was calm and smiling with satisfaction. His arm was thrown over Peg's body. They lay in an embrace, and his palm lay tenderly on her soft breast. A wonderful aroma emanated from her. Hair, perfume, her natural smell. How he loves this smell and how he misses it. They haven't slept together for so long. He hasn't hugged her or felt her presence in so long. Gradually coming to his senses, he began to understand that everything was wrong. He hugs not his one true love, but a pillow. His hand is not on her breast, but simply on the bulge of the pillow. He tried to open his eyes to understand where he was, but his eyes would not open. He was in pain, very, very painful, in all parts of the body. He began to hear sounds, beeps, pulsating air, footsteps and voices. Feel the tube in the nose, needles and wires, and everything hurts. It must be me. In the hospital. He understood. But the smell of Peg, it's still in the air. This part of the dream was real. Seeing nothing, he was confused. All he knows for sure is terrible pain. He lay motionless, waiting for someone to hurt him. Suddenly, Peg found him and came to end his life. And then he heard. "Hi, Robert." It was her voice. She really is here, wherever here is. But how can this be? How did she find him? Would he really hurt him again? No, 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 he muttered, trying to move. It was painful to move. He struggled a little, then lay down, motionless. "Calm down, Robert. Everything will be fine." Peg's gentle voice sounded, trying to give him confidence. "You are in the hospital, but everything will be fine with you. I'm so happy I found you." He tried to get up again, but again found that he could not move. "Don't try to move, dear. You're in a cast and bandages. Do you remember what happened?" He was silent. He didn't remember, but he wasn't sure he should remember, and he didn't know if Peg was the cause of his injuries. Well, he knew that she was the cause of his old heart wound, but he didn't know if she was the reason he was wounded this time. "You took a terrible beating," Peg told him softly. "Some bandits attacked you and beat you until you lost consciousness. Your bones are broken and your internal organs are damaged, but the doctors say that you will recover and gain strength." Robert's mouth was dry. He wanted to speak, but his tongue and lips were too dry to work together. Seeing that he was trying to speak, Peg wet a washcloth and pressed it to his mouth to give him some moisture. "Why are you here?" asked Robert. "How did you find me? Are you the one who set those people on me?" She was stunned. How could he imagine such a thing? After a moment, she stood up. "I must tell you that you have woken up. They will want to come in and examine you. Then I'll call the girls and Charlie." With tears in her eyes, she left the room. "I'll come back and we'll talk again," she told the nurse. And soon men and women in scrubs were gathered around his bed. When she was finally allowed into the room, she walked over to his bed and gently took Robert's hand. She didn't know if he was still asleep. It was difficult to judge this from his closed eyes. "Darling, I didn't do anything bad to you," she said quietly. "Why do you think so?" "No, I love you. And since you left the hospital in Columbus and left me, there hasn't been a minute that I haven't thought about you and wondered what happened to you." Robert didn't move. Minutes passed. Finally, he turned his head in her direction. "Are you and Charlie still together?" he asked softly. "No, Robert. Charlie and I were never together. Charlie is our friend. You have always been and will be the only man for me." At this, Robert turned away from her. Why did she come all this way after all these years just to lie to him? She saw it and closed her eyes. So much time has passed, and she is already lying. And he knows it. But she must, at least for now. Finally, he decided to change the subject. "Why can't I see? Am I blind? The doctors say that your eyes were damaged during the beating. They were closed to let them heal. They say your eyesight may be affected, but you won't go blind. In a few days, the bandages will be removed, and then we will know more." "We? You mean me?" he thought. "You still haven't said why you're here. I'm here because you are my husband and I love you." After your disappearance, we looked for you all the time, but you were simply nowhere to be found. Every evening after work and every weekend, Charlie and I drove along all the streets, talking to everyone we met, trying to find you. I was confused. We didn't know if you were alive or dead. The head injury you sustained in the bicycle accident had changed you, and we were afraid you wouldn't be able to cope on your own. We searched for weeks. In the end, we had to give up. Here we go again. Peg and Charlie. Charlie and Peg. He wasn't wrong, and now she admits it. Does she think he's stupid? But I never stopped loving you and hoping that one day we would be together again. Robert is tired. He was confused, his head was pounding, and his body was aching. It was wonderful to hear Peg's voice and smell her. But he's so tired. I need to sleep, he said quietly. I'll go back to the hotel, make a few calls, freshen up a little, and come back tonight, Peg said. She leaned over the bed and kissed him tenderly on the lips. He didn't answer, already asleep. As she walked past the aid station, Robert's doctor approached her. Miss Stevens, could you spare us a few minutes and help us with your husband's medical history? All we know is that a week ago, he was brought to our emergency department unconscious and badly beaten. We accepted him as an unknown person. He had no identification on him, and his friends in the homeless camp knew him simply as Bobby or the mayor. Officers who responded to a 911 call about the beating searched his bag and found a piece of paper with a phone number on it. That's how we contacted you. Peg shook her head. Robert was an executive at a telecommunications company where we live, in Ohio. 7 years ago, he was in a terrible bicycle accident and suffered a closed head injury. He was in a coma for 5 weeks. When he finally came out of it, he was in a darkened state. The trauma had changed him. He went from being a confident, cheerful, and very smart person to being scared and nervous. My loving husband has turned into a suspicious introvert. We discovered that he had a metal plate in his skull, undoubtedly from a previous accident. Did he have any other pre-existing conditions that we should know about? Only high blood pressure, which he controlled with medication. And after the accident, his blood pressure seemed to return to normal. How did he feel when he entered? Well, to assess his condition, we carried out a full set of tests. Apart from the fact that he was poorly fed and in dire need of a dentist, he turned out to be healthy. And of course, since he was just now regaining consciousness, we weren't able to do any behavioral testing. If I may ask, how did it happen that he lives here on the street? Once he recovered from the immediate trauma of the accident, he began receiving physical and occupational therapy at the hospital, and he began to visit a psychotherapist in connection with the mental changes that we observed. All these activities were exhausting for him in his condition, but physically, he made good progress. On the mental side, things were more complicated. Somehow he became convinced that Charlie Ford, his best friend, and I conspired behind his back and caused the accident by trying to kill him. No matter how much we denied it, he was convinced of it and began to fear us. When the time came for him to be discharged home, he managed to sneak out of the hospital and disappear. Charlie and I, the police and all our friends searched and searched, but he just disappeared, like a ghost. That was the last thing we knew about until I got a call 6 days ago. Thank God he saved my phone number. Thank you, said the doctor. You filled in some gaps, and as we continue to monitor him, we'll try to fill in others. As soon as he comes to his senses, we will schedule a consultation with a psychologist. By monitoring his blood pressure, breathing, and pulse, I can tell that when he found out you were in the room, his anxiety levels skyrocketed. If this continues, we may have to ask you to stop visiting. Is there anyone else who could be with him, who wouldn't cause this kind of reaction? I'll see if one of his daughters can come. When he left, they were girls, but now they are already young women. He has no reason to be afraid of them. Of course, he has no reason to be afraid of me either, except in his imagination. With these words, Peg left for the hotel. She was exhausted, fearful, and guilty. Her thoughts were racing. Although she loved and missed Robert dearly, life had returned to normal after his departure, and his return would undoubtedly complicate things. And what to do with Charlie. 6 days ago in Ohio, Peg was drying herself off with a towel, having finished her post-sex shower. Charlie just needed it to be that nasty. Since Robert's death, Charlie Ford had been satisfying her sexual needs. But if sex with her husband was a gentle, loving session of mutual care and attention, then Charlie had to be athletic. Sex with him was like a wrestling match. And after 6 years of resistance, she finally gave in. And after so many years of living together and having regular sex, her connection with her missing husband faded, and her feelings for Charlie increased. He became a kind of support for her after the accident, and then after Robert's disappearance. She wouldn't allow herself to call it love, but it would be difficult to describe the difference. Oh, but there were differences. Robert was educated and refined. Charlie had graduated from high school and was smart, but street smart, not sophisticated and cultured. She and Robert loved to talk about books and attended the opera. Charlie liked action movies and NASCAR racing. No, she came to rely on Charlie and developed feelings for him, but he could never replace Robert. "You know, it will soon be 7 years since he ran away," Charlie said, lying on the bed, his body exposed. "You can declare him dead and we can get married." "Yes, I know how much time has passed," she replied, taking her underwear out of her dresser drawer. "We have already talked about this. I still hope he will be found. And Charlie, I appreciate everything you do for me and the girls, but I still see you as a friend, Robert's friend, but not as a husband. And Charlie, please don't wipe yourself on my sheets. I don't want there to be stains when I wash them." She carefully pulled on her panties. At that moment, the phone rang. She took it from the dresser and saw an unfamiliar number. She almost hung up, but something told her that she should answer. "Hello? Is this Mrs. Stevens?" asked a female voice. "Yes, I am Margaret Stevens. I'm calling from the Oklahoma Medical Center. A man whom we believe to be your husband has been brought to our emergency department. He suffered greatly from the beating. This phone number was found with the man's belongings at a homeless camp. We have this man listed as unknown, but a woman at the camp told the paramedics that his name was Bobby Stevens. I'll be with you as soon as I can catch the plane," she answered quickly. "Robert has been found," she exclaimed, running up and hugging Charlie. "He's alive. He's in a hospital in Oklahoma. I have to fly." She went to the closet, took out a suitcase, and began to pack her things. "Will you take me to the airport, or should I call for a ride?" she asked over her shoulder. "I'll take you. I'll take a shower while you pack," Charlie said, trying to hide his disappointment. Robert was his friend, and he was sincerely glad that he was alive. But damn, this really messes up his plans. They agreed that she would take the first plane out, and he could arrive later, after she could assess the situation. Returning to her hotel room, the first thing Peg did was call Charlie. "Charlie, I think it's better for you not to come. He gets very excited when I mention you. Seems to think we have something to do with this accident. Did you tell us about us?" "No. He is not in the right shape to digest this information. He almost never regains consciousness. His eyes are bandaged. His arms and legs are in plaster. There are internal injuries. In addition, he has a concussion and traumatic brain injury. I should have been there. Could have kept him out of the hospital." "Well, this train has already left. This morning, before Robert woke up, a police officer came to see me, asked a few questions and showed photographs. He lived in a homeless camp under a bridge. All of his belongings were stuffed into a shopping cart and secured to it. He was sleeping on the ground, covered with a couple of old blankets that he picked up from a junkyard, I think. So what Pedro said is true. He thought and asked, 'Did you find anything useful?' All they found was a piece of paper with my phone number and a family photo from our last Christmas together. He cut my face out of it, so it was just him and the girls. He was always a smart guy," Charlie chuckled. "Charlie, stop it. It's not funny. The man was destroyed and he did absolutely nothing to deserve it. He deserves to have his old life back. I'm afraid this won't happen. I'm hanging up. Should call the girls. They love their father and are very worried. Don't come here. I'll let you know if anything changes." With that, she took out her tablet and set up a Zoom call with the girls. When Robert disappeared, Lisa was in 7th grade and Laura was in 8th grade. Both are now in college. Lisa at Northern Illinois and Laura at Northwestern. Thank God Robert created this fund for them, and once he managed to get enough money into it to pay for their education, Peg didn't know, but he did it. Like Dad? Lisa asked as soon as the connection was established. Peg waited a moment to answer until Laura appeared. Your father woke up today. He is very disoriented. He still has that paranoia we saw after the bike accident. He seems convinced that Charlie and I had something to do with it. We may need one of you to come and stay with him because the doctor says my presence might upset him too much. Why does he think that you and Uncle Charlie were involved in this? Asked Lisa. What did you both do to make him think that? Did you have an affair before the accident? Peg pretended to be offended. I love your father and always have, and Charlie can never take his place. I don't know what put the idea into his head that something else was going on, but somehow it did. Tomorrow morning, I have my last exam before the summer holidays, and after that I can come, said Lisa. As an older sister, she had long been accustomed to taking the initiative. I can come next week, Laura said, not wanting to be left out and eager to see her father again. When Peg returned to the hospital, she was told that Robert was seeing doctors and she would have to sit in the waiting room for a while. When she reached the visitor's room at the end of the corridor, she saw a rough-looking woman sitting and waiting. She was younger than Peg, but she clearly had a hard life. She was clean, wearing an old dress that might have been in fashion 10 or 12 years ago. It was pretty worn. The black hair was not styled at all, just combed. They were starting to turn gray. The woman timidly raised her head as Peg approached her. They told me I could sit here, she said defensively, as if expecting that she could be kicked out at any moment. I came to see my friend. Knowing where Robert lived, Peg guessed that this woman might be from Robert's camp. Smiling, she sat down next to the woman and asked, Are you Robert's friend? The woman looked embarrassed. My friend is Bobby, she answered. He is the mayor. Is it true? There is a mayor here. And do you know him? The woman laughed. He's not a real mayor. We call him that because he takes care of everyone who has problems. Peg took a photograph from her purse. Is this Bobby? She asked, showing it to the woman. Yes, this is Bobby, but the photo is old. He doesn't look like that now. He is older. She hesitated for a minute, trying to figure out what to do. Finally, she extended her hand. I'm Mary, Bobby's friend. Some people call me Deputy Mayor. Peg looked at the woman and appreciated her appearance. She was dark-skinned, but her facial features did not indicate any particular race. She could be pretty, thought Peg, if I did my hair and makeup. Peg came over and took her hand. I'm glad to meet you. I'm Peg, Robert's wife. Mary recoiled, pulled her hand back, and covered her mouth in horror. Are you she? He told me about you, about what you did to him. My God, have you come to kill him? Please don't hurt him. I love him, and he loves me. Mary slowly reached into her satchel and pulled out a knife. She stood up and stood between Peg and the corridor leading to Robert's room. I won't let you hurt him, she said, holding the knife in her hand. He protects me, and I protect him. Somehow, Peg remained calm and in control. Mary, I'm not here to hurt Robert. I love him too, and want to help him get better. Please put the knife away before anyone sees you. I don't want the security to create problems for you. Please come and sit down so we can talk. I promise I haven't hurt Robert before and I won't hurt him now. Mary stood her ground, but hearing approaching footsteps behind her, she slipped to her chair and sat down, hiding the knife under the seat cushion. Peg smiled at her. It looks like we both love the same man, she said. Thank you for looking after him and being friends with him. I've been looking for him for years, ever since he escaped from the hospital. He said he had to run away because you and your lover were going to kill him so you could be together. Mary, Robert was a successful leader. We had a wonderful life. We have 2 wonderful daughters, we live in a beautiful home, and we have dear friends who all live in Ohio. But Robert was in a terrible accident and suffered a traumatic brain injury. He was in a coma for a long time, and when he woke up, for some reason he decided that my friend Charlie and I had arranged for him to be hit by a pickup truck on his bicycle in an attempt to kill him. That's not true, Mary. Charlie is Robert's best friend, and none of us would hurt him. Robert's brain injury made him suspicious and nervous. Tell me, Is he still like this? I'm the only one he trusts, she answered. He even lets me take his ATM debit card when he needs money to help someone and when he gets headaches. He doesn't allow anyone else to take it. At that moment, a nurse appeared in the corridor and said that Robert could receive visitors, but only one at a time. Mrs. Stevens, would you like to come with me? She said, smiling. Looking at Mary without the same smile, she said that she could see him later. Mary, why don't you go first? Peg said kindly. I know Robert will want to see you, and I haven't quite won his trust yet. Mary jumped up and, thanking her, almost ran along the corridor to Robert's room. Approaching the door, she slowed down and froze, looking at her friend, covered in a cast, with tubes and wires. When she saw the bandages over his eyes, she gasped. Bobby, it's me, she finally said. Can you hear me? She slowly walked towards the bed. Mary, yes, I can hear you. How did you get here? I came by bus, she said proudly. First, I went to the Y, gave them $5, and they let me take a shower. Then I went to the laundromat and washed some clothes. Then I asked the man at the bus stop how to get to the hospital, and he told me. Bobby, she said quietly. She's in the waiting room. Peg. I talked to her, showed him his knife, and told her not to harm you. She promised she wouldn't do this. She said she loved you, and I told her that I loved you too. We never talked about it. But after those guys beat you up and I couldn't help you, I felt it in my heart. All I could do was call Speedy and the other guys to come and drive these people away. Mary moved closer to the bed. Peg seems nice. She let me come to you first because she says you still don't trust her. She's right, I don't trust her. She swore to me that she didn't hurt you, and she doesn't want to hurt you now. Says you're disoriented after the accident. Mary, I suspected that before my accident, he put quotation marks with his only good hand. Something was going on. I don't know for sure if Peg had a hand in setting me up, but I'm sure Charlie did. He's been trying to get Peg away from me for a long time. At that moment, a nurse burst into the room with a trolley and began taking readings. She told Mary that Robert would soon need rest and suggested that she go and tell his wife that she could come and see him for a moment. I don't want to see her, Robert replied. She was so kind to me that I think you should let her visit you, Mary said, leaving the room. Robert was too weak to argue, so he just lay down and let the nurse do her thing. A few minutes later, Peg came in. Only 1 minute this time, the nurse said, trying to protect Robert. He needs to rest. Okay, just a minute, Peg replied. Robert, I just wanted to let you know that Lisa will be here tomorrow. I know you still don't trust me, but you can trust that Lisa loves you and has been beside herself since you left. Please be nice to her. Will, thank you for inviting her to come. Could you do me a favor and take Mary to camp? I don't like it when she rides the bus. Is there anything I should know about her? Mary has schizophrenia. She is very smart, graduated from Arizona State University, and was starting a teaching career when she started hearing voices. She lost everything and came to the camp about 3 years ago. She does a good job of taking her medications, but sometimes forgets. And sometimes she skips them on purpose because she doesn't like how they make her feel. Judging by the way she acted today, I'd say she's missed a few days, which means she may be going psychotic soon. She says she loves you and you love her. You are together? We are friends, good friends, but not a couple. Are you sleeping with her? No, not in that sense. But when one of us feels the need for release, we help each other. That's all I can say about this. She has a very unusual appearance. What is its origin? Asked Peg. Robert laughed. It's complicated. Her great-grandfather was a French missionary to China. He believed that peace between nations would come only when racial differences were erased. He married a Chinese woman and gave instructions to their children that they should marry representatives of a different race. This practice was passed down from generation to generation. Thus, Mary is part white European, part Chinese, part African, part Samoan, part East Indian, and part Native American. Wow, Peg said. No wonder she looks exotic. She has beautiful dark skin. The nurse walked to the door and gave Peg a withering look. I have to go. said Peg. "I love you. Lisa will arrive tomorrow. I'll take care of Mary. Get some rest." Peg caught up with Mary, walking towards the elevator. "Robert asked me to give you a ride. Do you mind?" "Oh, yes, if you don't mind. I don't like riding the bus. I'm always afraid of missing my stop." "Okay, come with me, and we'll make one stop along the way," Peg said, looking at her smartphone. She found a listing and location of a spa and hair salon, with evening hours near her hotel. The elevator just arrived and they went down to the parking lot. Mary started to tell Peg where the camp was, but Peg asked her to wait until the next stop. "Robert said that you have some medications that need to be taken every day. Did you take them today?" "No, sometimes they make you drowsy, and I wanted to be alert so I could get to the hospital." "Do you have them with you?" "Yes. I can't leave them with my things. Otherwise, someone will steal them. They're here in my bag." "Why don't you take them now?" Peg said, getting a bottle of water from the center console. Mary rummaged through her bag, pulled out a couple of bottles of pills, and took some medicine. Peg drove to the spa, parked, and they went inside. Mary wondered what they were doing there until she heard Peg arranging for her to have a full treatment. A mineral bath, a manicure, a pedicure, and a haircut. "Let these ladies take care of you, Mary," she said. "I need to do some shopping and I'll be back before you finish." She gave the clerk who married Mary a $50 bill and said, "Take care of her. This is a very special woman," she winked, "and she may need some extra attention. I want you to become her friend and helper." The employee smiled, agreed, and took Mary away. Peg left the building and drove to the nearest department store, where she spent half an hour choosing new clothes, underwear, socks, and practical shoes for Mary. Not fancy outfits, but practical, durable, and warm shirts and jeans. Returning to the spa, she selected an outfit from her purchases and gave it to the employee to change Mary before leaving. Soon, Mary emerged from the curtained doorway, transformed. Hairstyle, a beautiful dress, a little makeup, and a smile that never left her face. "Look at me, Peg. I'm beautiful again," she exclaimed. Peg and the women tending to her oohed and ahed and showered her with compliments. "You are lovely, Mary." "Let's go have dinner," Peg said, smiling. They went to a small cafe that Peg had discovered a few days before. Mary felt uneasy at first, but Peg's confident presence soon calmed her down and she relaxed, enjoying the delicious meal. "Why are you so kind to me?" Mary asked when they finished dessert and pie. "Partly because you are Robert's friend, and therefore mine. Partly because you are a woman and I hate to see a woman who is unlucky. And to be completely honest, it's partly because I want to understand what's going on in my husband's life so I can try to improve my relationship with him. By the way, he told me how important you are to him, so I kind of thank you for that. But the main reason is that I like you. I got a call about Robert and I caught the first plane and was here for almost a week, but he only woke up today, so I was pretty lonely. It's nice to make a new friend. I don't want to think about you going back to camp and sleeping on the street," Peg said as they walked to her car. "Would you like to come to my room today and sleep in a real bed with clean sheets?" "Thank you, but I have to go back and take care of my things and protect Bobby's things. If I don't do this, everything will be taken away. Besides, I don't mind my life. I got used to living outside the home and not making demands on people. Where I live, no one expects anything." As they drove, Peg asked questions. "Why is he called the mayor?" "Bobby is very kind. He looks after people. He knows how to get money, so if someone gets into a difficult situation, he helps him. If someone is detained for vagrancy or begging, he can help with bail. But he will not help those detained for theft or causing harm, he says. No one should go to prison just because of bad luck. But a crime is a crime, and you have to pay for it." "What else does he do?" "Give advice. Most people in the camp don't know much. They are there because they are mentally ill, drug addicts, or stupid. Bobby helps them figure it out if they have problems. He is smart and educated, and when a dispute arises, he behaves like a judge. Doesn't take sides, but tries to find a way out for both sides." "What happened when he was beaten? What was it?" Some bandits from another camp heard that he had money. They came to rob him. He never keeps money on himself, only withdraws it from an ATM when he needs it, so he didn't have any. They didn't believe him. And I had the card because he had another headache, and he sent me to get money for Speedy's bail. They tried to get him to tell them where the money was. I came back, saw what was happening, and called a group of our guys to help Bobby. They came and pulled them off and saved Bobby, otherwise he would have been killed. Tell me about the debit card. Don't know. He has one. There's always money there. He doesn't use it often, mostly just to help people. Most have only the money they get from begging. Bobby has more, but he doesn't tell anyone where they come from or how many there are. I am the only one he trusts to withdraw from the card if he cannot do it himself. Where does he get money every day? Mostly moonlighting. There is a day labor agency a couple of blocks from the camp. Sometimes he does landscaping, sometimes he does painting work, well, and everything like that. That makes sense. He was always helpful around the house. I took care of the yard and put the house in order. When they arrived at the overpass under which the camp was located, Mary fell silent. "Why don't you drop me off here?" she asked quietly. "I can walk the rest of the way." "I want to see Robert's house," Peg said, continuing to drive. "Please, it will be awkward for me, and I'm sure Bobby would like to maintain his privacy. He is a very private person. Thank you for your kindness and generosity. Today was the best day I've had since things started to get confusing for me. But please allow me to maintain my dignity and respect Bobby's boundaries." Peg slowed down and looked for a place to pull over and stop. "Okay, Mary, maybe another day. I'm glad you had a good day and you're always welcome. Thank you for being such a good friend to Robert." She placed a business card in Mary's hand. "Here is my mobile phone number. Please call if you need anything or if you want me to give you a ride back to the hospital. Robert is worried about you riding the bus alone." Mary didn't answer, but she took the card and put it in her pocket. The car stopped, and Mary got out, clutching bags in her hands. Peg watched her walk to the end of the bridge and then disappear down the embankment. She turned the car around and headed back to the hotel. Mary grabbed her bags and headed towards her campsite. All eyes were fixed on her. Several men whistled. Then Speedy asked where she was and what was in the bags. "I went to the hospital to see Bobby. He was badly beaten. Lots of broken bones and blindfolds on my eyes. Those bastards almost killed him." "What's in the packages? How did you manage to pack everything?" Mary hesitated before answering. She was sure they were hoping she had money or something in the bags that they could steal and sell. "Bobby's wife was there from Ohio. She bought me clothes and gave me a ride. She seems like a good woman, but Bobby doesn't trust her." One of the women asked mockingly, "Did you tell his wife that you had sex with her husband?" "No, I didn't say so. She just said that we are friends." With these words, she took her bags, walked to her place, and carefully put her things away along with hers. A couple of people followed her, and she pointedly took out her knife, saying that she was tired and wanted to rest. Then she spread out her mat and lay down. She clutched the knife in her hand and kept her eyes open until she was sure that the others would leave her alone. At this time, Speedy came up and thanked her for posting bail for him. He promised to look after her, so she could get some sleep. "You and the mayor are my only friends," he said. "I am indebted to you for helping me." With that, he sat down next to her on the blanket and tried to look strong, holding an empty beer bottle as a weapon. Decided that in Bobby's absence, he would become Mary's assistant as deputy mayor. Peg drank 2 glasses of wine at dinner in the hotel restaurant. Several men came over to ask if she was looking for company, but left when she said she was not. Peg has a lot to figure out. She was truthful when she told Robert that she and Charlie had not met before the accident. She knew that Robert was aware that Charlie had been making moves on her for some time. Charlie is divorced, and the 3 of them spent a lot of time together. Charlie was at their house almost every day, joining them in everything they did. He was cheerful and helpful, and at times it seemed like he was an integral part of their family. He doesn't have his own children, but he loves Lisa and Laura very much, who called him Uncle Charlie. About 3 months before Robert's accident, Charlie began to come to the house at times when, as far as he knew, Robert was not at home. started pestering Peg to take their friendship to the next level. He knew that she was attracted to him and was head over heels in love with her. Charlie is the top salesman at the local Lincoln dealership and makes a decent income. Although they never talked about it, he knew that Peg came from a wealthy family and would receive a significant inheritance when her parents died. Robert made very good money from his job, but Charlie saw that they were living above the level that Robert's salary provided and believed that their lifestyle was subsidized by Peg. At first, Peg was annoyed by Charlie's advances. She loved her husband and had no desire to have Charlie or anyone else as a side hustle. She told Charlie about this as kindly as possible. Now I realized that I was too soft with their friend because he did not want to back down. His attention was so obvious that it created tension in their three-way friendship. Robert was getting impatient and couldn't understand why Peg wasn't taking more drastic measures. Peg could not have stopped his actions more decisively. Robert was an avid cyclist, and one of the things they enjoyed doing together was going on long rides around the countryside. They enjoyed fresh air, healthy exercise, tranquil scenery, and friendly company. But even traveling together began to feel tense, as Charlie sought to be closer to Peg. That's why Robert was riding alone when a pickup truck pulled into the bike lane and hit him in the back of the head with the extended rearview mirror on the passenger side. The bike flew to the side of the road, and Robert crashed headfirst into a pole. Witnesses called 911, and Robert was taken to hospital near death. It all happened so quickly that descriptions of the pickup truck conflicted, and it could not be identified. It wasn't even sure whether the pickup was blue or green. Even though it all happened 7 years ago, as Peg sat sipping wine after dinner, the memories of those days were as fresh as if it were yesterday. That day, after Robert rode off on his bicycle, Charlie found her in the kitchen. The girls were visiting friends, and they were left alone. Charlie came up behind her and put his arm around her waist. He stroked her neck and kissed her ear. "We are alone. I know you had the same thoughts about me as I do about you," he whispered, running his hands along her front and pressing his back against her. "Why don't we go upstairs and relieve the tension? Robert will never know about this." He turned her around to face him, then leaned down and kissed her on the lips. They had exchanged friendly kisses before, but this one was completely different. There was nothing platonic about the way he pressed his lips to hers, and his hands moved up and down her back, squeezing her buttocks, then slid up and pulled her into his arms. At first, she resisted, muttering, "No, no," and trying to push him away. But then the kiss began to warm her up. She laid her head on his shoulder, shuddered, and allowed him to take her hand and lead her to the stairs and bedroom. They barely began to climb the stairs, hugging, when there was a loud knock on the front door. Frightened, she stopped and tried to turn around to go downstairs and open the door. Charlie tried to hold her back, not wanting to miss this chance, but she pulled away and panicked when she saw 2 police officers on the street. A thought flashed through her head. "I know what I did was wrong, but what does the police have to do with it?" "Really?" She opened the door nervously, and one of the police officers asked if she was Mrs. Stevens. She confirmed that she was, and he said, "Sorry to break the news, but there has been an accident and your husband is in the emergency room at Good Samaritan Hospital." "Is he badly injured?" she asked, feeling her heart pounding. "I don't know what condition he's in," the policeman answered quietly. "But usually we're not sent to such incidents unless they're serious." Peg felt the ground disappear from under her feet. She was already going to let Charlie have her, and Robert was wounded and maybe dead. The roar in her ears was deafening. Just as she began to fall, Charlie grabbed her under the arms and helped her to her feet. "Thank you, officers," he said politely. "I will help my friend's wife get to the hospital." He secretly smiled to himself, thinking that these policemen would provide him with a reliable alibi. This feeling quickly passed when he realized that he had lost his chance to have sex with Peg. Having regained her composure, Peg freed herself from Charlie's embrace and got down to business. She gathered her purse and keys and headed to the garage. "You don't want me to take you? Are you still in shock?" Charlie asked caringly. "No, Charlie. I don't want to be around you after what you almost made me do. I'll get there myself. Please look after the girls. I'll call when I know more and you can tell them what's going on." With these words, she walked out the door and hurried to the hospital. Peg, the girls, friends, and Charlie stayed at Robert's bedside for the 5 weeks he was in a coma. He underwent several operations. First, they relieved the pressure on his brain. Then they installed a steel plate in the place where the skull was crushed by the blow. Only the helmet prevented fatal injury. Her reverie was interrupted when the waitress came over and asked if she needed anything else. Looking around, she realized that the restaurant was crowded and people were waiting for free tables. She apologized for being slow, signed the check, left a tip on the table, and headed out the door. Looking back, she saw that the waitress was still standing at her table. "Could you send a bottle of the same wine to my room?" she asked, and headed towards the elevator. Opening the door to the room, she was shocked to see Charlie Ford sitting in an easy chair by the window with a glass of whiskey in his hand and a smile all over his face. "Hey, baby, I just had to surprise you," he greeted her, standing up and walking towards her. "Charlie, what are you doing here? I asked you not to come. Now is not the right time." The last word was muffled when Charlie kissed her on the lips and pulled her towards him for a hug. "I know I asked," he answered softly, "but this is the first week without you since we've been together, and I can't stand it anymore. Robert doesn't need to know I'm here until he's ready to accept the news." She gently pushed him away. "I'm tired. The day was long and stressful. I'm not ready for a serious conversation right now," she said, looking him straight in the eyes. "I want to drink a glass of wine, which should be on its way. I want to take a hot shower and go to bed, but I'll tell you this. I am Robert's wife. We made vows to each other that I treasure very much. You were very comforting and helpful to me when he was missing, and I didn't know if he was alive or dead, and I will always be grateful to you for that. But now he has been found. He is alive. He is still my husband, and I intend to become his faithful wife again." Charlie started to protest, but she raised her hand to stop him. "I told you that I'm not ready for a serious conversation today. I asked you not to come, but you ignored my request. I'm sure there are other rooms available in this big hotel, so I suggest you go down to the front desk and see what you can do. Or go to Motel 6. I don't care." At that moment, there was a knock on the door from room service. While Peg accepted her bottle of wine and tipped the young man, Charlie took out his suitcase, collected the few things he had taken out, but made no move to leave. "Peggy, you know you love me, and you know I love you. From what you've told me, and from what I already know, Robert is incapable of being a worthy husband to you and probably doesn't even want to be one. I don't like it when people brush me off like that, and I don't intend to quietly leave. I have too much heart and soul invested in this relationship. Nevertheless, I'll go and rent another room. See you tomorrow, and we'll talk then." He picked up his suitcase and went out. Peg stood and looked at the door. Her mind was in turmoil, relief at having found Robert, shame at letting Charlie seduce her, worry about the future, whether she and Robert had a future, and an overwhelming weariness. She quickly poured a glass of wine, took a long sip, then undressed, held her head high, and headed into the shower. She is a strong woman and has always been a problem solver. I knew that I would sort out this situation too. She fell asleep within minutes of her head hitting the pillow. This morning she missed breakfast in the hotel dining room. Not wanting to deal with Charlie, she slipped out the side entrance into the parking lot and drove towards the hospital. Having stopped at a cafe, I bought coffee and a Danish cheese pie, and then headed to Robert. At the nurse's desk, she was told that he slept all night and woke up for breakfast. His concentration seemed to be improving, and doctors hoped the head injuries would not lead to further mental problems. The nurse was just finishing taking his vital signs when Peg entered the room. Her scent immediately told him she was there, and he tensed. She saw how his body shrank, and a worried expression appeared on the part of his face that was not covered with bandages. "Good morning, dear," she said in a gentle voice. She leaned over the bed and kissed him lightly on the cheek. "I was told that you are much better today and that you will recover well." "Yes, I really feel better. They even stopped some of the painkillers and I can think more clearly. And yet, I return to the question, Why are you here? I'm here because you are my husband. I love you. I've worried about you and missed you every minute of every day for 7 years, and I can't wait to get you out of here as soon as you're ready, take you home and resume our life together. He didn't answer her. He was suddenly overcome by fatigue. I'm tired, Peg, and I can't talk right now. I need a rest. He turned away from her and fell silent. She decided that he had fallen asleep. She felt the phone vibrate in her purse, went out into the corridor and said quietly, Charlie, good morning. I'm in the hospital. He's conscious, but just lays down to take a nap. No, don't come up here. My presence upsets him, and I'm sure that your presence in the room will be too much. I'll leave soon because I see that he doesn't want me here right now. Lisa will come later, and maybe he'll tell her what's bothering him. I'll call you later when I get back to the hotel. Robert couldn't hear much of what she said due to her quiet speech and the noise of all the monitoring equipment in his room. But he knew that she was talking to Charlie. He knew that Charlie was in town, and he didn't hear anything that could change his mind about them being together. She returned to the room and sat down. He played possum until sleep actually overcame him. Peg, hearing his quiet snoring, gathered her things and left the hospital. Peg didn't know what to do. She didn't feel ready to confront Charlie. She wanted to go to the homeless camp and find Mary. She wanted to better understand what Robert's life was like, why he wanted to return to her, and how close he and Mary had become. Has Mary replaced her in his life? Or, as he said, are they friends who help each other when in physical need? But the main question, the problem that gnawed at her every moment, was why Robert was afraid of her and Charlie. What happened that makes him believe that they are plotting something against him? Does he really think that she had something to do with his accident? Of course, Charlie was persistent, trying to get into her pants. But Charlie is Robert's best friend. Could he believe that Charlie was trying to kill him? Where did this idea come from? She called Charlie and they had lunch at a small diner she had discovered. They had a pleasant time talking, but avoided the obvious question of what the future should be like. Charlie tried to broach the subject, but Peg refused, saying that there was too much uncertainty about Robert's condition and his own desires, as well as whether and how they could rekindle their love affair. Before I decide anything, I need to understand why he is afraid of me and you, she told him, closing this topic. Soon it was time to go to the airport to meet Lisa. Peg hadn't seen her since spring break, so aside from the circumstances of the situation, it was a reunion between mother and daughter who share a special bond. Peg has spent the past 7 years raising Lisa and Laura as a single mother, with Charlie's help, of course, while the mystery of Robert's disappearance has brought them closer together. After greeting hugs and exam results, Peg told her about her father's situation, his condition, his promising prognosis, his recent living arrangements, his friendship with Mary, and, most alarmingly, his fear. I am his loving wife. Charlie is his best friend. Why does he think we can hurt him? Wait, Mom, do you mean Uncle Charlie, with whom you have been living in the same apartment for the last 7 years? The guy who sold his house and moved in with us, taking his father's place in your bed? Is this the guy you mean? Well, yes, but your father doesn't know about it. Until your father disappeared, I flatly refused Charlie. But for some reason, he thinks that we were together. But even if this is so, this does not mean that we should have had a grudge against him, wishing him harm. It does not make sense. I hope he opens up to you so I can understand it. So, you want me to become your spy? Very nice, Mom. No, that's not what I mean at all. I want you to allow your father to feel the love of his daughter and his family after such a long separation. I want you both to be able to reconnect in a way that I haven't yet been able to. I want him to come home and become my husband and your father again. What about Uncle Charlie? What remains for him? It's complicated. I made it clear to Charlie that if your father came home, he would have to go and look for another golden goose. Golden goose? So this is who you are to him? Oh, I'm sure he sincerely cares about me. He certainly worked hard to be a part of my life, but I also think he enjoys the comfort and luxury that our family's money provides. And if it comes down to it, I don't think he'll give it all up easily. They went to the hotel, brought Lisa's things into the room, and went to have something to eat on the way to the hospital. Peg expected Charlie to be somewhere nearby, but he was nowhere to be seen. They happily chatted over food and then headed to the medical center. Peg gave Lisa directions to Robert's room and then found a quiet corner in the hallway to wait. "Hello, Dad," said Lisa. "I missed you so much." She walked over to his bed and leaned over to hug him, not knowing what was safe to touch between all those casts and bandages. In the end, she just kissed him on the cheek and took his right hand in both of hers. "Hey, pumpkin," he tried to say, but the words got stuck in his throat. "The hardest part of this whole ordeal is being away from you and Laura. How are you? Is everything okay? I'm so glad you remember me. Oh, Dad, we all missed you, wondered and worried about how and where you were. Nothing was the same without you." She spent the next 2 hours trying to tell him about everything he'd missed: school, boys, field hockey, prom, college life, everything you could think of. She didn't mention Charlie, other than to remember how she and Peg kept looking for him after he snuck out of the hospital. If he wants to know about how Charlie moved in with his mother, he needs to hear it from her herself. Finally, it became clear that as much as he wanted to know about all this, he was simply too tired to continue. And my head hurt really bad. Lisa went down to the hall to meet her mother and found her sitting with a woman who she realized was Mary. After introducing them, Peg explained that Mary had called and she had come to pick her up. "Sorry, I seem to have tired him with stories. He was already falling asleep when I left," Lisa told Mary. "Nothing. I'll just sit and watch him sleep," she said. "Someday he will wake up." Peg reached into her purse and gave Mary some money. "We can't stay, but when it's time to leave, call a taxi. Please don't wait for the bus at this time." As they walked to the car, Lisa explained to Peg that she had done most of the talking during the visit, telling her father about the events in her daughter's lives since he left. "Sorry, Mom, but he didn't really ask about you. I only mentioned Charlie a couple of times and didn't talk about living conditions." Mary sat and watched her sleeping friend. She didn't know much. Will he recover? Will he return to camp or to a comfortable life in Ohio with his wife after leaving her? And why is he so afraid of Peg? She seems like such a sweet woman, not at all like the evil one he told her about. Meanwhile, Charlie was talking on the phone. "Pedro, I'll need you here. Grab the next flight and bring Maria. I'm not getting anything from this bitch." The next day, Peg came to a decision. Robert had recovered enough to give her some clear answers. So after having breakfast at a restaurant across the street from the hospital, once again eluding Charlie, he and Lisa went there, ready for a serious conversation with Robert. When they entered the hall, Lisa asked, "Mom, why are you avoiding Uncle Charlie? There's something wrong here. He showed up after I asked him not to come. He insisted that I devote myself to him, leaving Robert. And what Robert said makes me think that he has reason to believe that Charlie and I had something to do with his accident. I know I have nothing to do with it, so that leaves Charlie. Your father is a smart man. He might not have been at his best since that bicycle accident, but he was no fool, and he must have had some reason to believe that Charlie and I were together and wished him harm." They rode in silence in the elevator to Robert's floor. At the nurse's station, they were told that he had had a restful night. The second night, he had slept until he had woken up from his coma. "I think it happened because his friend Mary was next to him all night. She calms him down," the nurse said. When they arrived in the room, the nurse was taking readings, and Mary was sleeping peacefully in a chair next to the bed. They quietly entered the room, and while Peg took the remaining side chair, Lisa wandered along the corridor in search of an empty chair that she could fetch. As soon as the nurse finished her business, Peg said quietly, "Robert, Lisa and I have come. Good morning, dear. How are you feeling?" "Well, my whole body hurts, but not as much as yesterday, so I guess it's healing," he replied. "No matter how many painkillers they give me, I can't get rid of the headache. I've been having headaches ever since I had a bike accident, but this is something new and more serious. Anyway, good morning, Lisa. Peg, I always know when you enter the room because I smell your perfume and that Peg scent that I have loved for so long. Where's Charlie?" I don't know where he is, probably at the hotel. In the dark of the night, when sleep did not come, Peg decided that she would not lie anymore. She decided that she would be truthful with Robert, no matter what, even if it hurt, although she would try to say everything as softly as possible. Robert, knowing how upset my presence makes you and how strongly you react to the mention of Charlie, I asked your best friend to stay away for a while until I understand why you react this way and why you think that Charlie and I are plotting against you. He arrived anyway and is waiting for me at the hotel so that I can tell him that his visit will be welcome. If this is so, then he will wait until hell freezes over and people walk on Jupiter, answered Robert. You always call him my best friend. Best friends don't try to seduce their friend's wife. Best friends don't conspire to get their friend out of the way. Hearing this, Peg was horrified. At that moment, Mary stirred in her chair. Peg knew that those reclining hospital chairs might look comfortable, but they weren't. Good morning, Mary, Peg said cheerfully. I bet your back hurts after sleeping in that awful chair. Not so bad, actually, Mary answered sleepily. Much better than sleeping on the ground. And I wasn't drenched in rain, she said, looking out the window at the spring downpour. I know you need to go to the bathroom after a long night, Peg said, pulling out her purse. Why don't you and Lisa walk along the corridor, and then, when you've done your business, Lisa will go with you to the cafeteria for breakfast. She handed Lisa a wad of cash and quietly addressed her daughter. Make sure she takes her medicine and drinks water. We all need it to be in balance. When they were gone, Peg turned back to her bandaged husband. Robert, it's time for us to clarify the situation. I need to know why you think I wish you harm and why you're so angry at your best friend. I know you realized he was harassing me even before your accident, but I stood up to him. If you had seen how worried he was after the accident, how we drove through all the streets of the city looking for you after you left the hospital, I was delirious, and he was my anchor. We searched and searched day after day, evening after evening. He, like me, was determined to find you and bring you home. Peggy, I've thought a lot about you over the years, mostly good, sometimes not so flattering, but I've never thought you were naive. Charlie is a good companion. He's a lot of fun to be around and can help with projects around the house. Always ensures that our vehicles undergo maintenance in a timely manner. But Charlie Ford is a car salesman. He knows how to present himself well, make a positive and powerful presentation, and not mention the negative sides of any situation. Charlie always has an ace or trump card up his sleeve. You can have fun with him. He's not someone you can trust with your life. Especially, Robert became very animated, especially when money is at stake. And he's smart enough to figure out that you have family money. We never talked about it, but he knows. Okay, Peg replied. I know that he enjoys the benefits that our friendship has brought him. But knowing this and admitting it, why does it make you think that he has a grudge against you? And, more importantly, why do you think that I could be against you? Since we've been together, I've never done anything other than love you. Even when you disappeared and I didn't know why or if I'd ever see you again, I loved you. Honestly, the fact that you suggest that I might wish you harm is very offensive, but I love you so much that I am ready to ignore the insult, if only you are ready to tell me where it comes from. Lisa and Mary returned to the ward. They heard Peg's words. Tell her, Bobby. Tell me what you told me, Mary said quietly. I think she deserves to know. Please, Dad. I want to know too, Lisa interjected. What made you disappear from my life just when Laura and I needed you as teenagers? Why did you leave us? Robert took a deep breath. Even though his eyes were closed, the women could see the color begin to rise up his cheeks. Okay, I'll tell you. And then you can try to convince me that I'm wrong. After Charlie began to spend more time around us, visiting our house and joining us at parties, I noticed that there was more and more sympathy between him and you. I saw the chemistry between you. It began to seem to me that instead of him being the third wheel in our relationship, I became him, and it hurts. I still believed that you would be a faithful wife to me, but I didn't believe Charlie. And the day I wanted us to go for a ride, And Charlie said he didn't want to, and you agreed with him, and you two decided to stay and let me ride alone. I was upset. It seemed to me that you had some kind of agreement that you wanted to be alone. But it was just a feeling, and I had no proof, and you always loved me. So I took my helmet, went outside, and got on my bike for a ride. I hoped that you would change your mind and follow me. But you didn't go. The door closed behind me, and everything that happened on the other side happened without me. I was only a couple of miles out of town when a blue pickup truck turned into the bike path, and the rearview mirror hit me in the back of the head and knocked me off my feet. As I fell, I looked and recognized Pedro's pickup truck, and Pedro himself at the wheel. Then apparently he hit his head on a tree and lost consciousness. Pedro? Which Pedro? Who is Pedro? Asked Peg with bewilderment. You know Pedro, this is Charlie the loader at the dealership, his auxiliary worker and errand boy. You mean Pete? I always called him Pete, Peg said. So you thought that since you recognized Pete or Pedro driving the pickup truck, I was the one who dealt with you? This is too much. Yes, said Robert. And a few days after I returned to the world from a coma and began to undergo rehabilitation, Pedro came to my hospital room. He apologized for hurting me. Said he just had to knock me into a ditch and mash me a little so Charlie could get you into bed. But I forgot how far that big rear-view mirror stuck out, and when I saw how it hit me, I headed towards the hills. Charlie was very angry with him. He is a good enough friend not to want to hurt me, but not so good that he does not seduce my wife. Pedro said that while I was riding my bike, Charlie was already dragging you up the stairs to have sex in our bed. It was then that I realized that you were lost to me. After that, he left. Perhaps after this, you felt some distance from me for the first time. But I tried to brush it off and convinced myself that Charlie and Pedro were just fooling me so he could get you. Robert, you have to believe me when I tell you that Charlie tried and failed to get me into bed that day. Peg said quietly. She couldn't tell him how close he was to it. Well, maybe not. But a few days later, just as I was about to be discharged home, Pedro returned. He said that after you and Charlie tasted the forbidden fruit, you decided you needed to be together, and I needed to be out of the way. Pedro said that he had a car parked outside and a bag packed for me, and that we should get out of here as soon as possible. I hate to hurt you, Senor Stevens, he said, and I don't want Charlie and your wife to hurt you anymore. Come with me, I will take you to safety. Due to the concussion, I was too confused to resist, so I went with him. We walked out the back door of the hospital, got into his car, and he drove me for 2 days until we got here, and then he stopped the car at a homeless camp and stopped. He gave me a debit card and a piece of paper with a PIN code and said that there would always be money in the account. He wished me luck, then pushed my suitcase out of the car and drove off. That was the last I heard from anyone from my old life. I think Mary has already told you about what my life has been like since I've been here. Peg and Lisa sat with tears in their eyes. What a bastard, Peg growled. I slept with that worthless son of a bitch for 7 years. God, what a fool I was. Lisa gently touched her hand. Robert turned his head away, and his mouth bared. Mary stared at her with a shocked look. Suddenly she realized what she had said. Oh God, Robert, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You were gone, I was lonely, and he was persistent. I resisted as best I could, but in the end, I gave up. And then the guy I innocently called Uncle Charlie. The guy who filled the void when you were gone. The guy who took Laura and me to soccer games and was Laura's dad at daddy-daughter dances, moved into our house and started leading myself as a husband and father, Lisa said through tears. Dad, you have to believe that we didn't know anything. Mom loves you so much. She was so worried when you suffered. And then when you disappeared, she would never betray you the way you imagined all these years. We were all fooled. We thought that Charlie was our friend and was helping us through the crisis. And we had no idea. Peg turned to Mary. Thank you for trying to fill the void in Robert's life and being his friend and confidant, she said. I feel a little better that he had such a close friend who helped him survive this nightmare. Believe me, Mary replied. Bobby helped me and the others more than any of us could have helped him. At this point, it became obvious that Robert was overcome by fatigue and needed to rest. His good hand rested on his forehead, as if he was trying to squeeze out a headache. Mary and Lisa invited Mary back to the hotel for lunch, and this time she accepted. She was dressed in the new clothes that Peg had bought for her, and after she and Lisa spent a few minutes in the ladies' room with the mirror and makeup, she felt quite presentable. Upon entering the hotel, they were shocked to see Charlie, Pedro, and a Latina they didn't know sitting in the lobby bar enjoying drinks together. Charlie and the woman looked very familiar to them. Pedro seemed to be enjoying a taste of the high life. Lisa headed towards their table. "Let me go kick this worthless son of a bitch balls," she said through clenched teeth. "No, wait," Mary said, grabbing her hand. "They don't know me. You guys go back out and go through the back door. I'll take a table next to them and try to hear what they're talking about." Peg gave her the room number and told her to order a drink in the room and then come back when she had something to say. "Take my phone and see if you can record them." She showed Mary how to start recording and how to point the camera. Mary spent the last few years among desperate people. Some were in desperate need of food, some were in desperate need of oblivion, some were in desperate need of human communication. Many were simply desperate to be left alone. She was not prepared for the conversation she overheard at the next table. "I've put up with this crap long enough," Charlie said. "I was Bob's best friend. I comforted Peg. I was a surrogate daddy for these entitled bitchy ladies. I'm ready to pay and earn." "So what do you want?" asked Pedro. "I want Bob to have an unexplained medical failure and die. Then I want to marry a grief-stricken widow who has a terrible accident, ready to share the booty with the girls. I like them, and if I play it right, I might even be able to seduce the younger one." "Nice. Very nice. And I'll stay on the beans," the woman said. "When you get a wife and daughter, do you think you'll have enough left for me?" "Don't worry, baby. I always have enough for you. And Pedro will also get a good reward if he doesn't screw up this time. Lord, there should have been a simple turn and flight, a cheating wife, a divorce from her husband, and then grandma. But instead, endless nonsense. Sorry, boss, but these are good people. I don't like this." Pedro became nervous. "You don't have to like it. If you want to share the spoils, you have to do the work." Mary heard all she could bear. As she stood up to leave, she bumped into the conspirators' table, spilling their drinks. She took good aim, and Charlie's glass fell into his lap. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, bumping into a chair. "We need to get Bobby out of the hospital to safety," Mary exclaimed, running into Peg's room. "They're going to kill him." "Wait, what are you saying?" Charlie was his best friend. Why would he kill him? Peg was shocked. Even though Robert had told them, she still couldn't understand that Charlie was a bad guy. Mary handed her the phone. "Play the recording," was all she said. "Maria, why don't you come to my room and help me get rid of these wet clothes?" Charlie said, standing up after a drink was spilled on him. "And you, Pete, go to the hospital and see how we can help Robert get out for good." Peg's blood ran cold as she watched the video on her phone. Lisa cried quietly. They were shocked to realize how thoroughly they had been duped. Lisa spoke first. "I will kill him. Does he want to kill Dad and sleep with my little sister? It will not happen. I let that bastard into my bed. I never thought, God, what a fool I was. And all this time, Robert slept on the ground because he thought I was in love with this monster. Sorry, girls, there is no time to worry now." Mary realized that she needed to take the initiative into her own hands. Communication with people from the real world gave her strength and sharpened her ingenuity. "We can kill later. Now we need to protect Bobby." Peg and Lisa looked at her in surprise. Mary grinned back at them. "Hey, I may be crazy, but I'm not stupid." She looked at the phone. "Is it possible to somehow print a picture from it?" "It would be possible if I were at home with our printer," Peg said. "Let's take him to hospital security. Maybe they can do something about it," Lisa suggested, pulling herself together. The women grabbed their purses and headed for the door. At the hospital, Peg and Lisa went to look for security. Mary went to Robert's room, hiding a knife under her clothes. When she arrived, he was already asleep, so she moved a chair closer to the door, to block the path of anyone who didn't belong there, and took over as guard. At the security office, Lisa explained who they were and asked them to protect her father. She showed the security chief the video recording that corroborated her story and asked if copies could be made from the phone to show the suspects' faces. Together with the IT specialist, they transmitted a screenshot which clearly showed all three faces to the hospital network and displayed a message on monitors on all floors. Stay alert. By the time the women reached the hospital, Pedro had finished his rehearsal. He measured the distance from the infirmary to Robert's room, noting surveillance cameras and blind spots. I resisted the urge to chat with a particularly attractive nurse because I didn't want to draw attention to myself. He thought that if he could get hold of a janitor's or orderly's outfit, then with his Latino appearance he could become invisible. Entering the room, he saw that Charlie was having fun with a woman. She leaned over the edge of the bed, naked and out of breath. As always, he was invited to join. While they were having sex, Pedro told Charlie what he learned at the hospital. If we go to a uniform rental place and buy me a janitor's outfit and Maria a nurse's outfit, then one of us can get close enough to inject something into an IV or turn something off. Okay, first thing tomorrow we'll find a uniform store. Meanwhile, Peg and Lisa rose and joined Mary in Robert's room. While they were reporting their progress to security, Robert stirred and moved as much as he could. "What's happening?" he asked. "Meeting?" "Darling, as soon as we can remove the blindfolds from your eyes, we need to get you out of here. You are in danger." "I understood this as soon as I heard your voice," he answered bitterly. "Bobby, honey, you got it all wrong." "It's Charlie. He's the one behind all this," Mary told him, taking his free hand. "Peg, Lisa, and I will protect you and make sure nothing happens to you. But we need to get you to a safe place where they can't find you." "I'm in no condition to leave here," he commented dryly. "I have an idea," Lisa intervened. "I thought we could take him to a hotel," she told Peg and Mary. "Better yet, let the hospital transfer him to a rehabilitation center. We will keep the location confidential so he can receive the physical therapy and treatment he needs to recover. Dad, when does your doctor usually come to check on you?" "God knows, I haven't seen a watch since I came here," he joked. "Usually after breakfast, and then, I guess, after lunch, before he goes home." "Was he already here this afternoon?" asked Peg. "No, unless it's during sleep." "I'll go to the nurse's station and tell them we need to talk to the doctor as soon as possible," Peg said, walking out into the hallway. As luck would have it, Robert's doctor arrived just as she arrived. She asked if he had seen the security message, and he replied that he had. "They're after Robert," she told him. "Can we transfer him to a rehabilitation center where they can't find him?" "Yes, but it will take some time to prepare everything." "Can we transfer him to another ward in the hospital, where they won't look for him?" "I'll check now." An hour later, a small army of medical and transport personnel moved Robert to a private room in the hospital's maternity ward. Security was provided by a retired policeman dressed in riot gear and Mary, who again took up post right in the ward. For some reason, no one has yet discovered or confiscated her knife. Everyone who came to his former ward or called on the phone was informed that he had been discharged. The next morning, Pedro and Maria, wearing borrowed uniforms, went up separately to Robert's former room. Pedro passed by, working in the hallway with a broom, then went back down the stairs. "Nurse!" Maria looked into the nursing station. One of the real nurses was about to tell her where he had been transferred when she noticed she wasn't wearing a badge. "I don't know you. Where is your badge?" she asked. Maria began to tell her the story of losing her badge when the nurse saw a security message and photo appear on the computer monitor. "Wait here. I need to check something," she said, and went to the other end of the room. When Maria saw her reaching for the phone, she panicked and quickly walked towards the elevators. The nurse quickly dialed security and warned them to follow her as she exited the elevator. Stepping out of the elevator into the lobby, Maria fell into the arms of a security guard and was hurriedly taken to the waiting area where she was to wait for the police. Coming out onto the landing, Pedro saw her being taken away. He slipped out the door and headed to his rental car, then called Charlie. "He's gone, boss, and security has grabbed Maria." "What do you mean he's not there? Where did he go?" Then, "Crap, they will discover that Maria is here illegally and send her back to Mexico." "You better get out of there before they spot you," Charlie said. "Go back to the hotel and we'll try to sort this out." Pedro entered Charlie's room and saw him sitting at the table with a laptop. "They must have noticed Maria because she didn't have a badge," Charlie said as Pedro looked over his shoulder. "I took a screenshot from the hospital website and got the logo. I'll make myself a badge. It won't be perfect, but it should do the job if no one bothers to look closely." "It's much worse, boss. They have our faces on all the computer monitors throughout the hospital." "Damn it. How did they do it?" "Don't know. I only caught a glimpse of it when I passed the first aid station on the way. It looks like this was done while we were sitting in the hotel lobby. That means Peg knows something. We're done. When I go after Robert, I will have to wear a surgical mask, like a doctor. Why look for him now, and how will you find him? He must die. Maybe I can convince Peg that I didn't do anything, and the plan can still go ahead. Anyway, I'm tired of supporting my old buddy Bob. He must meet a tragic end. Maybe we'll even sue the hospital for a ton of money. All that remains is to find him. Let's hide here and keep an eye on Peg. Someday she will have to return here. Then I'll let her lead me to him." The next morning, Charlie followed Peg as she drove away from the hotel. Instead of driving to the hospital, she drove 10 miles in the opposite direction and parked in front of a rehabilitation center connected to the main hospital. She walked slowly to the front door to ensure that if she was being followed, she would be seen entering. Briskly, she walked through the lobby and down the hallway that led to the exit at the back of the building. As she walked out the door, she looked back and saw Charlie just approaching the exit. Satisfied that he did not notice her departure, she closed the door and got into the small sedan Lisa had rented that morning. Charlie stood at the front desk, trying in vain to find out Robert's room number as they drove away, this time heading straight to the hospital. Lisa dropped Peg off at the door of the maternity hospital, and she went to the airport to meet her sister. Laura managed to negotiate with the college so she could leave early. She will take the last 2 exams online. Entering the room, Peg saw that Robert had already woken up, and Mary was still at her post at the door. "Have you been up all night?" she asked Mary worriedly. "Yes. I think I dozed off a couple of times, but not for long." Peg handed her the money. "Go have breakfast. I'll keep watch for now." Mary hesitated, but hunger and fatigue took over, and she got up to go. "Here, you better take this," she said, handing Peg the knife. "It's not too big, but it's sharp." Mary pointed to a plainclothes security officer standing in the corridor and headed towards coffee and food. Peg greeted Robert and told him about the amazing events of the last 24 hours. "You were so right about Charlie," she finished. "I'm ashamed that I allowed him to deceive me for so long." Robert just nodded. "Tell me about the debit card, Robert. How does it work? Are you saying that you don't know? I always assumed that you were behind this, paying me an allowance so that I would stay away and not interfere with you two. Oh, God, Robert, it kills me that you could think that. No, as far as I knew, one day you disappeared into the fog, and I never knew where or why. And when will you return or whether you will return at all? So tell me about the map." "That day, when Pedro dropped me off on the side of the road, he handed me the card and PIN and said that there would always be money there. When I went to use the card, I discovered that there was $1,000 on it. I spent my money sparingly and tried not to let my balance get too low, but eventually it was down to $200. The next time I used the card, the balance rose again to $1,000. From then on, every time I lowered the balance to $200, it was replenished again to $1,000. I decided that there is enough pity in your heart for me to prevent me from starving to death." Tears rolled down Peg's cheeks. It was not only his words, but also the fact that he spoke without emotion. No anger, no sadness, no bitterness, just emptiness. She reached out and hugged her long-lost husband. "I love you, Robert. I can't believe how cruel and selfish the guy I thought was our friend was to both of us. He won't get away with this, I promise. I don't know how long it will take or what I will have to do to convince you that I had nothing to do with this betrayal, but I will never stop trying." Peg then asked the question that had been on her mind since she arrived in OK City. "Robert, I know Pete, or Pedro, dropped you off at the homeless camp, but why did you stay there all this time? You are a smart person, with education and business acumen. Why didn't you find a job and move into decent housing?" When you say it like that, it all sounds simple. But understand, shortly before I was thrown here, I was in a coma. I had a serious head injury and, at least initially, all my synapses weren't firing. I had terrible headaches, dizziness, and other effects of the concussion. In general, I was not much better off than the drug addicts and mentally ill people in the camp. When I came to my senses, what happened plunged me into deep depression. I was so mentally depressed that my physical abilities suffered. I was so angry and upset at you and Charlie that all my energy was spent feeling sorry for myself. And Mary didn't come along until a few years after me, so there wasn't really anyone holding me back. Peg cried quietly. The pain and suffering that befell her beloved Robert was beyond her strength. She slipped her arms through the remaining wires and tubes and hugged him tenderly. She held him for as long as she could stay in the uncomfortable position she was in, until he finally pushed her away. He still wasn't ready. Lisa and Laura had an emotional reunion at the airport, excited and relieved that their father had been found. Laura was amazed by all the revelations about Uncle Charlie that Lisa laid out while they were driving to the hotel. And when Lisa said that Charlie hoped to seduce her, she laughed, until it dawned on her that this was reality, and then she fell silent. "How could he deceive us for so long?" she asked finally. As Dad said, he is a salesman. Entering the hotel to drop off Laura's luggage, they did not notice Pedro, lurking behind a palm planter and watching the door. When they got down to the hall, Charlie was already sitting in his car at the entrance, dressed in a doctor's suit, ready to follow them wherever they went. "This time I won't be fooled," he swore to himself. The sisters parked outside the maternity hospital and confidently walked inside, believing that the earlier ploy would throw Charlie off the scent. He waited a few minutes after they entered and followed them, holding in his pocket the syringe of fentanyl that Pedro had filled for him. It cost him a lot, but for the benefit he was seeking, it was worth it. Laura's reunion with her father was joyful and emotional. Both were filled with happiness and at the same time sadness over lost time. Peg and Lisa stepped aside to give them a chance to be together. At this time, Mary returned from the dining room. She had coffee for Peg and forbidden baked goods for Robert. Lisa had already told Laura about Mary, so their acquaintance went smoothly. Mary indicated to Peg that she wanted to take back her knife, and Peg quietly handed it to her. Mary resumed her seat in the chair by the door. They were all chatting amiably when the doctor appeared at the door. At first, no one attached any importance to this. Mary was the first to notice something was wrong. First, she noticed his badge, which didn't look quite right. Then I wondered why he was wearing a mask, since most other medical workers no longer wear masks unless they are near a sick patient. Approaching the bed, he said, "I need to add a special medicine to the IV," and took a syringe out of his pocket. Mary was already on her feet, drawing her knife, when Peg recognized the voice. "Charlie, what are you doing?" she demanded. That's all Mary needed to hear. "You are a bastard," she screamed, swung her right hand in a wide arc, and plunged the knife into Charlie's groin. The sharp knife easily passed through thin clothing and pierced the attacker's flesh. Charlie screamed and reflexively grabbed the wound, stabbing himself with the lethal syringe into his thigh. In the confusion, no one could understand what happened next, and all four women told different stories from different points of view, but Robert, who had been blindfolded the day before, dimly saw Mary's left hand hit the syringe, pressing the plunger. A moment later, fentanyl had entered his heart and brain, and he collapsed to the floor, hitting his head on the steel leg of his hospital bed. The security guard heard Charlie's noise and scream from the hallway and rushed in just as Charlie fell. He grabbed Mary by the arm as she leaned over Charlie, shouting insults in his face and throwing more and more blows. The officer radioed the alarm. When a nurse burst into the room a minute later and saw Charlie on the floor in a pool of blood, she immediately announced a code blue. Doctors and nurses poured into the room from all sides, but it was clear that Charlie had left and would not return. An autopsy later confirmed that fentanyl killed him, but a blow to the head from the fall likely would have also been fatal. The stab wounds were dramatic, but minor, except for the initial wound in the groin. The rest were inflicted after death. The police conducted an investigation and collected statements from everyone who was in the room. Mary's homeless status and possession of an illegal knife nearly swayed the police to charge her with stabbing, but Peg and the sisters' insistence that she was only protecting Robert's life caused them to change their minds. Robert's calm assurance that Mary's quick actions were heroic and saved his life ended the discussion. With the threat eliminated, Robert returned to his room in the main hospital. The events of that day were so traumatic that Peg and the girls took Mary back to the hotel to clean up and rest. "You won't live in this camp anymore," Peg told her. "We'll take you there, collect your things, take everything he might need from Robert's cart, and bring it here. You can tell your friends what happened and tell them that Robert will come back to Ohio with us. I don't know how everything will be there without the mayor," Mary worried. "We'll talk to Robert about who can be trusted to take his place," Peg answered. After thinking a little, she added, "We will give a debit card to whoever becomes the new mayor so as not to leave Robert's friends without a livelihood." Later, while Lisa and Laura were driving Mary back to camp to pick up her and Robert's things, it was finally time for Peg and Robert to talk. Peg had been dreading this moment, but she knew it had to happen if she was to have any future with the man she loved. Sitting at his bedside, she saw that several bandages had been removed from him during the night, including those that hid his face. She knew his vision was blurred, but from where she sat, his eyes were just as blue and piercing as the ones she'd fallen in love with 24 years ago. "Darling, I have to tell you something about what happened during your absence. The first and most important thing is that there was not a single moment when I did not love you and did not want you to come back to me. That being said, I have to explain something. Peg, you don't have to do this. I know that Charlie took my place. This was his plan from the beginning. And then I just don't care. I have adjusted to life here, and Mary will help me return to my role as mayor. I have something to tell you, and I'm going to do it. First of all, Charlie never took your place in my mind and heart. When you got hurt, I was devastated. First because I was afraid of losing you, but also because Charlie had almost succeeded in seducing me. He was close. Too close. I was racked with guilt and shame for letting him get into my head. But while in the hospital you imagined that we were doing this, abandoning you, this was not the case. I had no desire to cheat on you, and I believe Charlie was smart enough to realize that the best thing for him to do was return to being a platonic best friend. I had no idea what she and Pete were doing, and I was puzzled when you disappeared. Charlie put on an Oscar-worthy performance, driving me all over the streets looking for you, even though he knew full well that Pete dumped you here. Posters with your photo were posted all over the city, and there were appeals on radio and local TV channels. The girls cried every night, and I was delirious. When things got so bad that people were afraid I might hurt myself, Charlie started his game. He started staying with me until late at night to keep me company, and after a while he started staying overnight. Not in our bed, I put him in the spare bedroom, but except for those times when he was at work, he was always with me and the girls. And yes, he played the role of surrogate father, going to their football games and even taking Laura to the school daddy-daughter dance. And in the end, I felt so lonely, and he was so persistent, that I let him into my bed. I didn't know if you were alive or dead, if I would ever see you again. Peg, you don't have to do this, Robert said softly. No, I have to. I am so ashamed and so sorry that I didn't wait for you and that I was so deceived. God, before I got the call that you had been found, he was talking about declaring you dead so we could get married. Now I understand that as soon as we would have received insurance for your death after marriage, He would have faked my untimely death and cashed out the money. I should have the word sucker tattooed on my forehead. It's important to me that you believe that I never loved Charlie. Yes, I trusted him. Yes, I leaned on him. And yes, I had sex with him. Reluctantly at first, but after a while, sexual release became natural. But we didn't make love the way we always made love to you. Charlie was an uncouth and indifferent lout. He didn't care about me. Robert was silent for a minute. I think you understand why I stayed away, he said. Although my perception of the situation may not have been entirely correct, I was right that danger was around the corner and that I was being paid to leave you two alone. I couldn't know how much you were or weren't under Charlie's influence, but from what I saw and from what Pedro told me, it seemed to me that you were together against me. Maybe I should have trusted you more, but for the past 7 years, I have believed not only that I had lost you, but that you were actively plotting against me. Despite all your protests, it is difficult for me to part with this belief. It was Peg's turn to remain silent. If Robert had seen more clearly, he would have seen the confusion on her face. Finally, she brightened up. Well, we have the rest of our lives so I can prove my love to you. As soon as you're discharged, we'll fly home, arrange for your rehabilitation in Columbus, and then we'll see. I already told Mary that she would come with us. Even if you and I are not destined to become husband and wife again, you will have my love, and your friend Mary will also be with you. Did you tell her that she was coming with us? Did it ever occur to you to ask her if she wanted this? You didn't ask me, did you? I mean, Peg, I'm willing to believe that you have good intentions, but you suddenly appear and start dictating how people should live their lives. People who don't always trust you. God, slow down. Step back a little. Let us catch our breath. Damn it. Just yesterday I was almost killed in a hospital bed, and your lover died trying to do it. Maybe I need a minute to digest all this? And by the way, it was not you who rushed to stop the killer, but Mary. And about Mary, you've seen her on good days. But you can't even imagine what she's like during bad times. And how often these bad days happen. Do not rush. Go to the hotel, hang out with the girls, go shopping or go down to the riverside, have a drink, and let me sort things out. A few days ago, I was in a coma, remember? I hid for 7 years, and I feel like my head is about to explode. Please, give me a break. Peg looked at him in shock. Oh, Robert, I'm sorry. Look, I know you guys protected me and saved my life. I thank you for this. I'm really glad to see you and glad to see the girls. Everything is just happening too fast now. I need a timeout. Okay, I understand. I'll leave you alone. A physiotherapist should be coming to work with you now anyway. I love you. See you tomorrow. She waited in the corridor for the girls and Mary. When they left the elevator, she intercepted them. I think I rushed Robert, she said, and upset him. Girls, let's go back to the hotel and eat. Mary, would you like to join us? No, thank you. I'll be alone with Bobby for a while, she said. Please talk to him about moving to Ohio with us, Peg asked her. With these words, Peg and her daughters went to dinner and rest. They also needed rest. Over dinner, the girls told Peg about their time with Mary, and Peg shared a little story about her conversation with Robert. Everyone realized that their hopes that the husband and father would happily return home were premature. They also agreed that Mary had become a bigger part of his life than they had realized. During the trip to the hotel, Lisa expressed what they were all thinking. Mom, I'm not sure Dad will want to come back to Ohio, and I'm sure that he won't go anywhere without Mary. I think you're right, Peg replied. He certainly showed no interest in returning to our life together as a husband. But whether he stays with me or not, he needs physical, occupational, and probably mental therapy, which he can get in Ohio and most likely won't get here, given the lifestyle and lack of a support system. I'm worried about these headaches, and I am confident that Mary would benefit from ongoing, high-quality treatment for her mental health problems. We can provide this for her in Ohio by driving her to appointments and making sure she takes her medications. We'll have to discuss all this with them in the morning. I'm tired of living out of a suitcase, and I miss home. I really want him to come back, but one way or another, I'm ready to leave. Tomorrow I'm going to force things. Come home and let us help you, or stay here and both fend for yourselves." The three changed at the hotel and then set out to explore the Riverside Entertainment District. They found a cool restaurant and spent some mother-daughter time there. There was a club nearby with drinks and music. They let their hair down, drank wine, and fought off most of the men who tried to pick them up. Several handsome and charming men asked Peg and Lisa to dance. Mama Bear Peg kept the wolves away from Laura, who was watching the bags and occupying the table. By 11 o'clock, they returned to their room, slightly tipsy, happy that they had fun together and remained chaste. The first order of business the next morning was to find Robert's doctor to see if he was ready to go. They were told that although he would need a wheelchair to get around the airport, he was strong enough to get on and off the plane. There will be problems with stairs, so he needs to find a place where he can be on the same floor. Otherwise, if physical and occupational therapy is organized, he will be fine. While it's not for him, an orthopedic surgeon, to recommend, he thinks it would be a good idea to get a mental health evaluation, and he expects some kind of treatment to follow. Armed with this information, the trio headed to Robert's room. They weren't surprised to see Mary curled up next to him on the bed. The narrow hospital mattress was not very comfortable, but, as Mary had already noted, it was better than sleeping on the ground. When they entered, Robert was already awake. He had a very pleased expression on his face and smiled at his wife and daughters. "Good morning," he said. "Couldn't resist going to the hospital for breakfast?" "Good morning," they answered in unison. "No, as tempting as it may sound, we already ate at the hotel," Peg replied, smiling. "We need to discuss the future," she began. "I'm ready to go home. I think the girls are ready too." They nodded in agreement. "I expected that now that the air has cleared of suspicion and fear, you, Robert, would go home with us. You will need physical therapy, and we will make sure you get the best available as well as good aftercare. Of course, at first we didn't know about your relationship with Mary. We don't want her to return to this camp, so it seems most logical for her to come with us." Robert and Mary looked at each other and smiled. It was clear from the expressions on their faces that they were also discussing the future. "Peg, it's very like you to plan for the future," Robert replied. "Both yours and everyone else's. I don't want to say that I judge you, you are an organizer. Mary and I talked, and we both agreed that we had no desire to go back to sleeping under a bridge. And although I'm not entirely comfortable being around you yet, Peg, I've come to believe that you mean me no harm. I have to say, I'm surprised that you were susceptible to Charlie's manipulations, but you considered him a loyal friend, and he played that role well until his plan began to fall apart. Then he became more arrogant and desperate and showed his true colors. He reached across the bed and took Mary's hand. With all that said, I accept your invitation to return with you to Ohio and reconnect with my family." He looked at each of them in turn. "But things can't be the same as they were before." Looking at Peg, he continued, "We've both changed. Both were victims of betrayal. I just found out about it first, and I had more time to come to terms with it." Turning his gaze to Mary, he said, "But I was lucky that there was someone who understood me." He squeezed her hand. "You, Peg, were introduced to the pain of betrayal for the first time. The guy you thought was supporting you actually set you up. Mary and I and our daughters will try to ensure you and help you get through difficult times, because you are the real victim in our little drama. True, I slept under the bridge, but I was lucky, and Mary saved me. Understand? I kept the pain of your betrayal inside me for so long, even if it was not true, I believed in it, that I cannot run to you again. So at least we'll be friends in the beginning. And Mary will be our friend. I don't know if you want us to live in your house or somewhere nearby. I think time will tell how our relationship will develop, the three of us. Some good things happened as a result of all this. I have to thank you, Peg, and you, Lisa, for helping Mary regain her confidence and self-esteem. You treated her like a friend, not a burden, and she made great strides. And so they began the process of moving back to Ohio. Robert and his team were so firmly established on their floor that the nurses, assistants, and doctors who cared for him held a small farewell ceremony. Mary received special praise for her devoted attention to him and, of course, for saving him in difficult times. Robert and Peg thanked everyone for their concern, and Peg announced that her family foundation would make a generous donation to the hospital, which will be used to care for homeless patients who cannot afford the treatment they need. With Robert's discharge, papers came instructions on how to move safely with his mostly healed injuries. There were prescriptions to be filled and reports for the doctors and physiotherapists he should see upon arrival. Peg and the girls took him and Mary back to the homeless camp to say goodbye and pick up everything they had left there. Robert gathered his friends around him and made a short speech, thanking them for their friendship and appointing Speedy as the new mayor. Unbeknownst to the others, he handed Speedy the precious debit card and whispered the PIN. "I'll make sure there's always money there," he promised. The flight passed without incident. To help Robert cope with the pain of sitting for long periods of time with sore legs and arms, doctors gave him strong painkillers, so he slept most of the way. There was some awkwardness when boarding the plane. Both Peg and Mary decided they would sit next to him. Not wanting to cause a scene, Peg acquiesced to Mary, a gesture that would take on added significance when they arrived home, and the question of sleeping arrangements had to be decided. Robert gently but firmly informed Peg that he had no intention of returning to the marital bed, at least not anytime soon, and that he and Mary would be sharing a room. Seeing that this message was causing Peg pain, Mary suggested that she should have her own room, since in a big house this would not be a problem. "I think it's best if we all have our own space until things become clearer," she said. Peg was relieved, but at the same time she realized that she would have to come to terms with the fact that she would no longer dominate the house, as she had been for the past 7 years. Robert saw a headache specialist, who determined that the impact had displaced a metal plate in his skull. Surgery corrected the problem to the point that his judgment and problem-solving ability were restored, but he will likely continue to experience lower-intensity headaches for the rest of his life as a result of his injuries. Pedro, realizing that the income promised to him would not come, left for the south. For several weeks, he visited brothels in Mexican border cities until he found Maria in Mexicali, the capital of the state of Baja California in Mexico. It took him a while to come up with a plan to get her away from her bandit masters, but he eventually succeeded and they fled across the border. They eventually settled down and settled in Deerfield, Michigan. After she was treated for several sexually transmitted diseases, they resumed sexual activity and eventually got married. They opened a taco stand and became pillars of the small community. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.